Alright, welcome back to another video in our Basics of Glide series. Now over the last few videos we've looked at 3 out of the 4 fundamental no-code pillars. We've had a look at databases and how you can set up different data types, different data tables, different data relationships. We've also looked at how you can now display that in a nice beautiful UI and UX, and of course we've looked at how you can edit the data in there using various different fields and how you can even build a full workflow to essentially control various bits of logic, various bits of interaction. Now I want to talk to you about the very last fundamental no-code pillar of APIs and integrations and how you can use them within Glide. Now Glide, up until very recently, didn't have a lot of kind of powerful workflow functionality. It's fairly new, and so Glide is still adding a bunch of features here and still making it work and making it powerful. So the main thing that I'm going to show you today is the Zapier integration, because frankly, once you can get Glide to send data to Zapier, you can kind of do anything that you want to do. And something else to remember is, if you do use a Google Sheet as your database, then you can use Google Sheet's own API to completely manipulate your data separately from Glide, and it will all automatically update and work. So if you want to understand that, you'll feel free to go and play with the Google Sheets API. In this particular instance, we're going to focus on how you can send data from Glide to Zapier. So I'm going to start by adding a new button. And we'll just pop this in here. Although we've been building a workout app, I'm not going to continue with the theme. I'm just going to show you more or less our usual kind of basic series API demo, where I've got this nice little Airtable here. It takes a tool name, takes a message. You can see the Glide one's been filmed right after Adalo, and therefore we've got that data in there. So what we'll do is we'll essentially hit a Zapier workflow that will take whatever data we send and add it to that Airtable. So on the right hand side here, I've kind of got 2 ways I can approach this. I can either hit create new action if I want to go into the Canvas editor and create a fully featured custom workflow, or if I just want to send some basic data to Zapier, I can do that too right here and without having to go into the Canvas. Now, immediately what happens is it comes up and says no apps configured in Zapier. And that's where this integration gets a little bit more interesting. If I come over here into Zapier, I actually have to create it here first before I can use it. So if I type in Glide, now all I'm doing here, by the way, is creating a new Zapier. This is the first screen you see when you hit make a new Zap. I'm simply typing in to look for a new trigger. I'm going to pick Glide. And you can see the word beta beside it, beta, however you want to pronounce it. That's because this is pretty new, so there's going to be some bugs, there might be some missing bits of functionality, but Glide are going to improve this pretty quickly, and perhaps by the time you watch this video, it's going to be a lot more featured than you currently see. So it's going to ask me to pick a trigger event. I'm going to hit new Zapier action. So this will trigger when a Zapier action is triggered via the connected Glide app. In other words, this particular Zap will trigger whenever somebody triggers this Zapier action. And pop in here, we'll hit continue. Now I've already set up my Glide account, as you can see, so that's nice and easy. When you do it, it's going to ask you for your Glide API key. You can get that by going into this little settings menu, scrolling right down to integrations and hitting copy Zapier API key to clipboard. Remember, never ever show anybody your API key, because then they can go in, mess with your app, mess with your data, do whatever they like. So it's going to ask you to set up a name for this app. I'm going to call this Glide Zapier button. Oops, can't type tonight. I'm going to type that. I'm going to hit continue, and it's just going to do an immediate test. Now this is kind of weird, because if you've watched any basics video before, or if you've played around with Zapier, then take Webflow for example. Usually what happens there is you create some sort of form or something like that that's going to send data to Zapier. Zapier then pulls the last time through. So if you submitted a form a few minutes ago, then Zapier will pull those results through and let you work from there. What happens on the Glide side instead is you set the Zap up first before you interact with it, and therefore you get all this kind of basic Zampo data. Now you can send up to 12 values with Glide, so immediately you've got value 1, value 2, value 3, so on and so forth, that you can play with and use as variables later in your app, or sorry, in your Zapier workflow. But when I hit continue, essentially the trigger's now set up. Now, if I go back to Glide though, nothing shows up yet. Let me show you why. In order to make it show up, you've actually got to build a full workflow first here on Zapier. Now, once you've set it up, you can go back and configure it, maybe play around with the variables if you want to by actually submitting the request. But at the minute, we've got to just configure it into being the workflow that we want. So again, we want to just create something that's going to go on Airtable. It's going to add a tool in here, add a message in here, and of course the when received date is automatically populated. I've already done this for a Adalo, and you'll see it in other videos as well, like for example our bubble series. Now I'm going to come in here, I'm going to hit create record. If you want to understand this a little bit more, the WAM stack is a great place to watch, where I kind of talk about how you can actually set up and use Webflow, Airtable member stack and Zapier together. So I'm going to fly through this. This isn't really about learning Airtable, it's more about understanding how Glide interacts with Zapier. I'm going to hit choose value, and I just need to find my API's demo table, which of course is this one up on the left here. And I'll pick the table, which is just called table 1. And so we've got tool, we've got message, we've got when received. Of course, that corresponds to the fields we've got here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, I want to use value 1 from my Zapier, sorry, my Glide trigger. I want to use value 2, and you've got when received. And again, if this is all starting to feel like, well, what is this guy doing? Go check out some of the Zapier videos we've got. Start with the basics, check out the WAM stack video, and you'll kind of quickly understand what's going on here. So this is going to send the information sample value 1, sample value 2 to Airtable. Let's check if that happened. Yes, it did. There, it's there. I'll delete it for now because it's ugly and doesn't fit in the rest of the format. But we've got it there, and we can immediately turn on the Zap. And I can name that Zap as well. You know, I can call it testing Zap, whatever I like. You can call it whatever you want to call it. And then when we pop back here, you'll notice that little red message just disappeared. And when I click none, I've got the Glide Zapier button, which is what I called that original trigger when we set it up. I gave it that name of Glide Zapier button. So you kind of have everything you need to go. I'm going to just give this a quick title, which is send data to Zapier. Nice and descriptive. And I can immediately start adding values. So we had value 1. If you remember, that's what we set up to go into tool. So I'm going to give that, I could add a variable in there if I want to send any kind of variable from a database, I can do that. But I'm going to put in something custom. I'm going to put Glide, and I'm going to add another value, and I'm going to put custom again, and I'm going to put this message was sent directly from the press of a Glide button. And it says here confirm message, so whenever I hit that button, once it's sent, Glide's going to show me whatever message I want. So I'm just going to put data sent, and that will pop up on Glide. So let's see it in action. So this message was sent directly from the press of a Glide button. You can see right now Airtable is empty. Let's go ahead and click send data to Zapier. It will spin for a little bit. It will pop up data sent, which is my confirmation message. And if I pop up here, then the message has appeared. And of course I could change that. I could say, let's just put a variable in there this time, just to show you pulling something from database. We will say, let me use it to push I'll push exercise A in. I'll do that. I'm still in play mode. I'll hit send data to Zapier, and within a few seconds, that will show up bench press. So you can immediately imagine if you wanted to save your data on Airtable, you could use this to send it. You could do whatever you like. Because you can use variables, you can send whatever data you need. And of course, you can integrate this fully into a workflow. You can come in here, you can do a bunch of stuff, whatever you want to do, and then you can simply add Zapier, which is not in alphabetical order, so it's right here in the middle. There you go, you've got your Glide Zapier, add whatever values you want, etc, etc. And so that in a nutshell is how you can use Zapier within Glide. And one of the things, Glide support for APIs, actually sending APIs at time of filming is not brilliant, but what you can do to work around that is if we go back to setup here, one of the things that you can do in Zapier, so if this triggers when a new Zapier action is received in Glide, one of the things that I can actually do is come in here, I can type Webhooks by Zapier, and Zapier itself, if I select action event and I essentially pick one of the things under create, I can send off an API request directly here in Zapier. So okay, I've got an extra loop in here, but I can now send a get request, a post request, a custom request, and if I do, let me do post. Then if you've done our APIs and integrations fundamental pillar, and if you've watched the example of sending an API request or reading the API documentation, then a lot of stuff in here will be immediately obvious to you. If I want to send data, I can send tool, You know, I could send Glide, for example, type that in there. If I want to add another key value pair, I can send message. You can type yada yada yada. And so you can, you know, some of this information here you really don't need, but you can put headers in, you can put basic authentication in, you can put in whatever you want. And of course, because you can access those variables, you can pull everything through from Glide. So that's just one way. I imagine by the time you watch this, Glide will probably have added full support for API calls, but if they haven't just yet, then you can do it right from in here, do it from Zapier, or kick off, you know, an integration directly. So lots of really, really powerful stuff. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can start using Zapier and API calls to essentially send data back and forth for your app. And as I said before, if you're using a Google Sheet, of course Zapier integrates with Google Sheets, so you can use that to manipulate data, send data back to Glide, and otherwise power your no-code app. Thanks very much for watching, and I can't wait to see what you build using Glide.